Yeah, I'm Dean Takahashi, a lead writer for GameSpeed, and I organize the GameSpeed conferences, and I think these two don't need a real introduction here. But as directors, they're very different people, and just last night we were discussing how they approach starting a game, and it's totally different. So do you want to describe how you start making a game? And David, you too.
Yeah, so we had dinner yesterday. We had the chance to talk. It's actually the first time we meet, and I think it's interesting because I said that we have a very different approach on things, but you said we're quite similar, and I do agree. But it's just the way I think we work, and it's very interesting. It's not that we have different approaches. For me, I approach every game I think about is always about the game mechanic first and the game concept itself, and then from that, I mean, there is a story arc. But from that, going to like finding the game, because I'm super curious and interested in the interactivity of gaming, like how to create a game mechanic that kind of like almost dances with the story, like it's part of the story, that you're part of it, and that's something that both in Brothers and Our Way Out we try, and with the next game, without talking about it, trying to push it even further. So that's the way I approach the game from the get-go. I mean.
Well, my approach is really to start. There's no rule. Sometimes it starts with an emotion. Sometimes it starts with an idea or a moment. On Heavy Rain, the game started with something that happened to me when I lost my son, my 6-year-old boy, in a mall, and I was so scared. Wow. And I was really curious to see if I could recreate this impression, this fear. In an interactive experience. So this is how Heavy Rain started. Detroit started based on a book called Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil that was really about this idea that there will be one day machines that would be more intelligent than we are. And I had this image, for whatever reason, that we would have an android, like an assistant, and he would go shopping with us and he would carry our bags. But at one point we would go in a restaurant and these androids would wait outside. And I had this image of a row of machines looking exactly like people who wouldn't be allowed to go in the restaurant and wait outside. And I thought, what if I was in the shoes of one of these androids? And what if I thought, this is unfair? And for me, that was the starting point of the story. So I started pulling strings and tried to see what stories comes with it. But in a nutshell, the most important thing for me is what people feel during the experience. It's all about emotion. Of course, it's very important what you do and which buttons you press. All this is key, and it's a way to be immersed in the world, and it's absolutely a key component. But at the same time, my experience is that people remember not so much what they did; they remember much more how they felt. And if you think of the best games that you guys played, probably you more remember the strong emotional moments and the turning points in the story much more than the buttons that you pressed. So this is why I focus on this beyond anything.
So do we have a basic just tension here between story and interactivity?
I would say yes in a way, but in a good way. I mean, I would argue, I mean, I hear what David is saying, but I do still believe, and I think it might be because my background is a filmmaker. So I think I tend to try to get away from that as much as possible. And I do agree with David that, yes, emotions are very important, but I also believe that there's something unique to the storytelling in video gaming, that medium itself, and that interactivity itself, connecting to the game mechanic could be very interesting. For me, it's not really just pushing a button. For me, it could be that if I can make you, let's say I would make a game about love or about an alcoholic father. If I can make you, or mother for that sake, if I can make you feel that you're actually controlling it, make you feel I mean, it's almost like you're like when you're way less passive in a game and way more interactive, then it kind of like it could be a more emotional, powerful impact, I think, because that's also unique to gaming, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So there's a good scene in Red Dead, I guess, where you actually play a drunk person wandering around a saloon trying
Perfect.
to find somebody, and
Perfect.
every person you see is like an illusion, I
Yes.
guess, and you're actually trying to find the real person.
Yeah.
So that's a good scene to you.
That's a good scene to me. However, that game was a bit too long, but that's another discussion. I think games are too long, but that's something I would like to discuss as well, like here. I want to discuss everything, but I mean, I don't think we have the time.
Do you have
Yeah, to me, what's really unique is the fact that video game is the only medium on which you create something with your audience. I mean, if you're a filmmaker, you create something on your own, then you show it to people. They can emotionally react to it, but they cannot change the content. What is fascinating with games is that actually we create something together. On Detroit, I tell a story with millions of people that I never met, and this is the most fascinating thing when you think about it. And it's so unique to interactivity. And of course, I agree with what Joseph said about the importance of controls. The sense of mimicry, the fact that you feel in the shoes of your characters, sometimes playing with erosion of controls. We were talking about the fact of having a baby in your arms. If you do it mechanically, it's a sense of mimicry. It makes you feel like you're the character, and it really awakens something in you that, oh, maybe you did that one day in your life, and it will remember you emotionally this moment because physically you do it. So I think this is or being drunk is also a very good example, and we call that erosion of controls. It's the fact that you have a hard time controlling your character because he's drunk. There are many tricks that you can play like this that will reinforce your involvement and your immersion in the story, but also your emotional involvement in the experience.
And I guess solving the tension, I guess, results in some just very different kinds of games, right? This tension between story and interactivity. And if are there certain kinds of games that you would put on one end of the spectrum and then other games on the other end? Is it simply the difference between a game on rails versus an open world?
I have opinions about everything. It's like, no, the thing is like this. Look, if you look, both games should exist, like really. But if you ask me, I'm more type of a guy that like more linear experiences. I mean, we talked about this before. You have the open world games today. I mean, I played this year maybe finished Assassin's Creed, Red Dead, Days Gone, and one more. What is it called? Spider-Man. I liked the Spider-Man game the most, actually, because it wasn't too long, But I finished all of them. And the problem with I think open world games is that they tend to end up in a situation where you have to copy and paste design, which makes me lose the story. For that sake, I do enjoy the linear type of games more. The Last of Us or Journey, like those types that gives me something, that experience that I can follow from the beginning to the end. With that said, that doesn't mean that games that like Detroit that I also played and finished, I didn't enjoy that as well, because I did. However, it's like what I hear this industry is going to is like linear and rails seems to have a negative tone, which I don't like. I think it's stupid to say that because both games should exist. I mean, not everybody. I mean, sure, I do agree with you that choices is part of video gaming, but choice is also something they're doing with movies that you can choose. Like on Netflix, they're testing it. So that's not really unique for gaming only. You can do it in a TV series as well. So I'm just saying, like, both should exist. Both being able to choose, but also, being able to follow a story. Because at the end of the day, as David says, it's about being emotionally attached and emotionally touched by a game. And if you look at a great movie, you will be emotionally touched. It doesn't necessarily mean a choice will make that emotion stronger. It could make it stronger, but it could also make it weaker. That's why I think both games should exist. But I do hear the negativity about on rails and linear games, which I don't like, because it's the opposite today, I would say. Games are supposed to have so many choices, so open, so this, so that, so it can become confusing sometimes. I would love to make an open world in the future, and let me tell you, it's going to be very different, because I would rather do an open world that's kind of like a 10-hour experience and open and actually filled with content that is like super unique and different than having to do going on repeat all the time. So sometimes you can lose the story in open world. That's why I actually enjoyed, you should stop me at any point. That's why I enjoyed Spider-Man, which is more of a shorter experience, more focused, Yeah.
I think there are many different ways of telling an interactive story, and I don't think there's a right one and a wrong one. I think there are different games telling different types of stories in different ways. What you will get narratively from an open world, for example, is very different from what you will get from a game on rail from a game like Detroit that is really an interactive drama where your choices matter. It's different things for different audience, and I think that's absolutely fine. Even technically, in matter of structure, there are different ways of putting this together. Many action games these days made the choice of having an action scene, then a cutscene, then an action scene, then a cutscene. So splitting the story and the action into two parts, which is one way of doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. We took a different direction on Detroit, where we really chose to put you in the shoes of the characters, let you make your decisions, and let you face the consequences of your decisions. And for me, that's something that is really important. I think that the choice makes the experience emotionally stronger when the choice is relevant, when it's emotional, when you can relate to what's going on. If it's just a choice, do you want to open the left door or the right door, no one cares. But if it's something really emotionally involving, then it becomes important. And then I think it takes another dimension, probably, than films, for example, where the characters make decisions, but you can't really, you can agree or disagree, but you won't change what's going on. Here, you tell the story, and the story is told through your choices, and you feel emotionally responsible for the characters. And this is what I like about it.
So for Detroit, how many endings could you have had? And for your last game, you could have 2 endings, right?
Yeah, and the only 2 endings is to create. It was the whole game concept. I mean, I would like to have 1 ending, like really. Yeah.
We could never exactly count how many endings there were to Detroit. I mean, it was not about the endings. It was about having different paths leading to different endings. So it's the journey. The journey itself is different, and different characters can be present or be dead, have made different moral choices, and be in different situations in the end. So you take the character of Marcus, which starts this revolution, for example. He has a different path, and he can become a violent character, will lead a violent revolution, or a pacifist character. And there are many, many other choices in the game.
And would it bother you or your team if players only chose maybe 1 or 2 of the branches and never played all 10 or 20?
No, that's absolutely fine. That's part of the concept, and we try to have choices that are kind of balanced. I mean, if you have a choice where you have 0% or 10% of the people making it, then it means it's not really an interesting choice, because it means the dilemma was not really there. And we love choices when it's really 50-50. It depends on your moral values. It depends on who you are. You can really project yourself into this choice and say, what would I do if it was happening to me? That's the kind of choices that we like. So usually we have a balance that is usually 50-50, 40-60, or sometimes 30-70 max. But what we realize is the very positive impact it had on the community and on the sales of the game. Let me give you an example. In the past, YouTubers, for example, were kind of problematic to us, because people were showing the game, and the players were watching the videos and think, okay, I got the story, I don't need to play the game, I know what it's about. With Detroit, we saw the opposite happening, because they were showing one walkthrough, but they couldn't show all the things happening and all the branches. So players watching it thought, oh, but I wish he had done this, so I'm going to buy the game to see what would happen with my own choices. So suddenly they became our allies, and they helped us to promote the game somehow, which was great. But in general, what I love the most is to hear 2 people talking about their experience. Did you see this? Did you see that? And this character died there. What? No. They compare their walkthrough, and they realize how different they are. And this is what I prefer. Although some players may think that their story was linear because the story they had was the story they were supposed to have. So it's about explaining that, no, your story is what it is because you played that way, but it could have been very different.
And I guess part of why this is a fun discussion is because what could change here, right, in the future. You brought up YouTube, and in some games now, like the Mixer games in particular, they're encouraging the game developer to take into account the audience for a streamer and whether or not they get a vote in how the game is going to proceed. Like, they can drop in a bunch of power-ups for the player at a certain stage in the game when they're struggling. Like, so you get audience participation in basically the story of your game. That's kind of weird, right? But things like this can happen and change the way you make games, I guess.
Yeah, it could, but for me, I'm not really a big fan of it. Like I do think sometimes developers, is too many times saying, oh, what do the players want, and why the player community, player this, player that. I'm like, I almost compare it to a relationship. If you are in a relationship and you're always to your woman like, what can I do for you, please, hello, hello, you get tired of it. You need to like a fluid, like give and take. Like I love my players, but they also should respect me and trust me in the vision I try to give. So I think from a story perspective, I think it's important to have a clear vision and go with it and stick with it and trust it. Because I know many decisions from, I'm not as experienced as David is, but I know from the 2 games I've done till now, I'm working on a 3rd, many decisions, if I would have based them on what the community would say or what people wanted to play or what people wanted to think they would play, then those 2 games wouldn't have been possible, really. So I do trust myself more,
How should we take the...
I'm sorry,
Oh,
if I may
go
just
ahead. Yeah,
jump on this. There are 2 quick things. The first one, I'm really curious about crowd play. We had something, not exactly crowd play on Detroit, but we could see some YouTubers playing the game and having the people posting in real time what they would like him to do. And I thought that was very intriguing. So yes, I'm working on single-player games, but there's something very intriguing in this concept that the community can drive the story in a certain way. I was very surprised traveling to China when I realized that many people watch the game in the local YouTube as videos, and they were commenting it live. And so you could see the video, and then the screen was filled with text passing by. I couldn't read; it was in Chinese. Hopefully, there were nice things, but actually, they were watching the game and commenting it. So I thought that was very.
You mentioned that most people played Detroit socially, right?
There's a very social component to the game. I mean, even many people play the game with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. The same way they would watch a TV series or a film together, except they can change the content. So it's a joke now since Fahrenheit, because each time someone comes to me and say, oh, I played your game and I liked it, and say, you play with your wife or with your husband, and they say, oh, do you know? I know because everybody did. It's really something incredibly popular to be played, these games, this type of games, this way, and that's what I really like. Just one last comment about what Josef said, and I agree. Your job, there are different ways you can consider your job when you're a creative person. Either you receive a marketing brief telling you all the boxes that you need to tick, and we need to do this and do that, because it was successful last year. So this is what you need to do if you want a game to be successful. And that's one way of doing games, and I respect that. But I think that if you want to be a creative person in this industry, you need to think about what people will like 4 years from now, not what they like last year. So it's a different approach. So yes, it's about taking risk. It's about going where people maybe don't want you to go. Maybe they don't believe in what you're doing, and that's fine. Because our work is to take the risks.
Yeah, definitely. I say a sentence that's kind of similar to yours. Like, I would like to make it that players don't think they're gonna like, but they will like. Don't know that they will like. That's the surprise element of it. That I didn't expect to like this game. But just to fill in with what you said before about like the YouTube community and how, because A Way Out is linear. It has some like choices. Those choices are based on different. Gameplay scenarios pretty much. They don't affect the story, they affect more of the gameplay because I'm more interested in that. But I remember when it came out, and a small game like A Way Out, which still was an indie title, it was like the #1 on Twitch, and I was like, oh shit, we're fucked, because like everybody knows the story, the ending. I'm like, okay, this is it, But then they told me like it sold really well, and because of like people saw the game and they wanted to play it. But in A Way Out's case, it wasn't like Detroit. It was just that they wanted to experience with someone that haven't seen the Twitch thing. So that worked out for us. And for us also, it was like a co-op game, so you play it together with someone. But the fun part, without spoiling, is that it's something happens very funny at the end. That kind of like I like to mind fuck with the players.
Spoil it, okay?
Yeah, I love to, fuck the players in the. Not mind fuck with the players. not fuck the players, but mine. And there is a moment in Brothers and this one and next one as well. I would love to talk because I'm
like the puppet master toying with the.
Yeah, it's like making them like second, like what the, like if. I remember, like I told my one of my designers, like we were doing a scene in the next game. I'm like, look, we're not really there yet. Imagine, like when people see this, they're gonna shit themselves. Like I want them to go like totally nuts. It's almost like we want to deliver the game with a couple of diapers. He's like, I want to buy a game with a diaper. I'm like, we're gonna do it. Let's, that's my motto every day at Hazelight. Like fuck it up. Let's do it like crazy stuff. Yes. And the next thing will be crazy. So.
Sometimes I think that Josef goes too far.
Yeah. You guys
That's what I like about it.
You guys have questions for each other about this discussion?
Yeah, we talked a lot about yesterday, but I do think the more we talk about, we have a different approach. I would say, but you don't feel we do, because I think I'm way more interested in interactivity. I think we have a different approach on this. Do you still feel that we have the same approach?
I think one difference is that you want to put gameplay into almost everything the player does.
Yes, yes.
A choice that happens, and you would ask, like, hey David, why can't this particular choice somehow involve the player pressing some buttons?
Yes, I actually said that to David yesterday. I'm like, if his next game, I don't know what it is, and I'm like, I'm quite sure that if you show me what it was, and I think if I would give you 10 ideas, you would actually say yes to 8 of them. Because like I played all of his games, and I do really enjoy them. But sometimes I'm like, this could be a little bit more. This could be a little bit more. So I wish I could like give that and say, what about this? And I don't think it would change anything. I don't even think it would.
You had this example of the rocking the baby thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this is something we work a lot on. Is how do we make daily life playable? That's what we have in mind. Giving you a gun and shooting at people is one definition of gameplay. I don't think it's the only one. I think you can have different ways of interacting. I'm interested in Heavy Rain. We had this baby in your arms, and you needed to rock it. And we always want to play with this kind of things. And how do we make things playable? And we have this theory that we call the sense of mimicry. How do we make you mimic on your controls what your character does on screen? So we developed this approach that we call Empire, where you are actually unfold. You really control the arm of the character. So even taking a glass is something that you actually do. And making daily life playable is something interesting, because suddenly you're not limited to in the stories you tell to zombies and big wars, and you don't need to be a soldier in order to kill people. You can play anything. You can play a tragedy. You can play a comedy. You can play anything happening in real life. And it's really funny. I had a discussion today with someone who asked me, why don't we have more dramas, more things like Mad Men or this type of TV shows where nothing spectacular happens? Why are games always focused on big physical things where violence is involved, where weapons are involved? Can't we create a game that wouldn't be about this? And this person was so right. Yes, you're absolutely right. Let's create games that are not about violence, that are not about only killing people. And there are games out there, of course. Let's create more. I think this is a very interesting way to develop for this industry.
Getting back to you, maybe you would want him to say, let you throw the glass into the fireplace or something like that, right? Just
which would
a bit more interactive, interactive control from the player. Right?
Yeah, but I do agree with what you say now. It's a very good point, actually, because that's what like triggers me. I would like at one point to maybe make a love story, but make it really playable and interactable. That would be something. I mean, imagine making a sex scene really like nice, like playable. I mean, not doing that. No, but I mean in a beautiful, emotional way. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if you can do that. I mean, in the future, who knows? Like, really, getting a emotional connection to something. Like, so it's just something very, very exciting about it. I do believe with David, we talked about it yesterday as well. Like, how can Nathan Drake kill so many people and still be this charming guy that get away and talk about his emotions? Like, he's murdering, I don't know, a couple of thousand people. So it's kind of weird in a way. So it would be interesting to I do believe that gameplay could be, I don't like to use the word fun. Sometimes it's okay to use fun, but it could be fun to actually just chop a cucumber like for a short while and then do something else. So you can definitely, the gameplay is definitely not necessarily shooting and fighting and stuff like that. So that's also something that's unique for gaming, and that is something that I do believe is super exciting. As a especially storyteller. If you're doing a multiplayer game or a competitive game, I'm guessing
No,
you don't want to cut
guys,
cucumbers.
you guys have a game like
Especially not in a sex scene, right? Because we can combine
I
ideas.
didn't mean sexy. I mean love scene. You know what I mean? It's more like
trying to get
emotions.
away from that discussion.
I mean emotion. It's not
Love scenes with cucumbers.
love. I don't mean that. You know.
Yeah.
It's more like you know. I mean, love is not about sex. You know. It is also about. You know what I mean? I mean emotionally. Emotionally, yeah.
Well, I was wondering about Minecraft, right? Very extremely popular game, but the story is what the players make it, right? I mean, do you guys like Minecraft or actually not like it because of what you do, right?
Again, I don't dislike, and again, I think all games should exist. What I don't like is that the industry community, players, and the reviewers and journalists is deciding that this should be good and this should be not good. So for me, every game out there is great. So Minecraft is one of them. I mean, I think it's fantastic that people can create their own content and create their own worlds, and it's obviously something that people want to do. So, but I personally, if you ask me, I don't play Minecraft because I think I don't like it.
It's like,
But that's for me, you know.
Yeah, but
what's my motivation? Or
Yeah.
Joseph's right. I mean, there are different games for different people and different expectations. And sometimes you want a great story, sometimes you don't. And I don't believe that we should have stories in every single game. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Even having some narrative dissonance, like the one you described where you're a serial killer and then you make jokes. I mean, in some games, who cares? I mean, it's not that important. I mean, but there are games, if you're serious about storytelling and you think, this is my proposal, this is what is strong about my title is the story, then you need to pay attention to the narrative dissonance. But again, it's an open discussion, and I think it's great that there are different games for different people with different approaches to storytelling.
So back to technology, David, you put a huge emphasis on the quality and the realism of the human faces, right? You know, it's going to get easier and easier for you to say make those things much more real or realistic. But do you want to go there? Like, how far along towards that realism curve do you want to go?
Well, photorealism is not a goal by itself, and it's just the type of rendering that corresponded to the stories that I had to tell at the time. I'm not saying this is an ultimate goal and all the games should be realistic. It's just, it worked very well with Heavy Rain, or it worked very well with the type of realistic stories that I wanted to tell. I don't think that it's going to be easier and easier with technology. It becomes actually harder and harder, because now you need to develop ray tracing, and now you need to develop muscle systems and this and that in order to recreate a human being. So in the past, you had like 80 polygons and you had to make a human being with this. That was a challenge, but it was something that you could handle. But now it becomes so complex. And the closer you get to realism, the harder it gets to get this extra, millimeters in order to be exactly photorealistic. So it becomes more and more challenging. But honestly, everything we learn is very interesting about lighting, especially about animation, about directing actors, about all these things. And I wish we will one day re-inject what we learned in realistic rendering into non-realistic renderings.
Do you have any thoughts on photorealism as well?
I mean, I'm not really in a place. Oh, sorry. I'm not really in a place where I can use photorealism right now. I mean, economically.
Because you're more like an indie budget.
Yeah, it's still. I mean, it's a little bit better now. I would call it more a triple I. It's something a double I, or what is it called? Like something like that. But I don't think I can afford and have the time to do something similar to. I mean, I believe that your faces are amazing, and if you look at Naughty Dog and those guys are like doing some really impressive. But as you say, the more realistic, the more work, and the more uncanny valley thing pops up and stuff like that. I mean, it's way harder in a sense.
And it's not necessary to achieve emotion because
Definitely, yeah.
you can have a cube that is incredibly expressive
Yeah.
if it's animated the right way and it tells something interesting. It doesn't. And look at Pixar. I mean, they're not doing realism per se.
No.
They make films with plastic toys, but they are incredibly moving and very convincing. So
Yeah.
it's not a goal.
Yeah.
It's not a necessity.
And I guess if you look at some of the storytelling games out there, like what are some things you admire? That's one question. The second one was if you looked at the competition last year for the award shows, it was between God of War and Red Dead. And even though they were both very well done, God of War won in almost every single awards contest in that contention. Do you think there's a strong reason for that? So, two questions there.
These are questions for you.
All right. Let me take it. What was the first one? If am I losing?
I have
it?
jet lag and I forgot the first one already.
Okay, yeah, you too. Oh shit, you got something in the air.
Uh,
Or is it in the water? You have put something. Maybe.
let's take the Red Dead one first. Red Dead versus God of War. Why did Red Dead always lose? It was
Look,
like,
I believe, like I told you, I played this. I play every game out there, and personally, my game of the year was actually Spider-Man. Doesn't necessarily say that I didn't like God of War. I think God of War was a great game, but for me, like I don't know, I connected more with Spider-Man for some reason. I know it was part of the Game of the Year award, but the reason why God of War won and not Red Dead, I do believe, is because God of War took some risks that were really cool. Like Corey and the team did something amazing. They took and I give credit to, of course, Corey and the team, but also to Sony, who dared to go a total different way. Take a very, very well-known IP as God of War and just totally go a total different way. And I think that's cocky and that is risky. And for being a AAA title and doing that, I think it really deserves to win every game of the year. And I think it's a great game. And I think that's the reason why. While Rockstar does Red Dead 2, it's a great game in many ways. A bit too long, if you ask me. A bit too repetitive in the mission design because it was pretty much the same: go shoot and back and shoot and get back. And you know. But it's still a great game. I'm not saying but it's still. But I think that's one of the reasons God of War won.
I guess storytelling games which you admire was my other question. I guess any other games out there.
Yeah, but again, I'm very allergic to repetitiveness in game mechanics. So in that sense, it means like I felt that both God of War and Red Dead were a bit too long. So I felt like I needed like a short experience. I think that's why I was a bit more invested into Spider-Man, especially Red Dead. I would say that lost me after a while, you know, because it was so long. It's like, who has the time today? I don't even have kids. I imagine you. Did you even play the game? I mean, but I mean, who finishes the game today? And that's also another thing we should talk about before.
I finished the game.
Yeah, you finished. But if you look at like people are saying to me like, "Oh man, A Way Out, 50% finish your game." I'm like, I should be happy for this. It's like, what? Are you fucking crazy? It's like having a movie on the cinema and half the people go out. It's like, what? We have a problem with people. We have a serious problem. People not even finishing our games, and still people are saying replayability. You know, someone tell me replayability, I will slap them in the head. Like the EA don't dare to say replayability.
Is it replayable?
I don't mean like that. I mean, we should focus on focusing on having a great experience first. I don't know how I got into that.
I think that's an interesting point.
Something that fires me up.
Very few people realize that actually it's usually between 25 and 30% of the people who complete the game that they started. So as Josef said, it's as if in a cinema people were leaving in the middle of the film, which is a bad thing. So on Heavy Rain we had 78% of the people completing.
Super high.
And similar with Detroit. But it's just the story. People want to know what's going to happen next. So the story can achieve this for you. And what is interesting on Detroit is that we managed to make people replay the story to see all the different branches, which is quite rare in a narrative game. And we could achieve this because we showed the branches and all the variations of the story And that's something really
I don't
great.
think I'd come across another game that showed you the flow chart of all the branches, right? And deciding to show that, was that a
Didn't you do that in Beyond as
interesting
well?
discussion?
Okay.
It's yeah, it's been a difficult choice, and there's a small story behind this. We were working on Heavy Rain, and on Heavy Rain, we had this play test. So before we release a game, we do play tests with dozens and dozens of people for a month to get feedback. And we had this spectacular chase where Jaden, the cop, was chasing the suspect. And the chase starting in the street, and then there was a covered market, and then there was a cold room. So it was a 3-act chase, very spectacular, a lot of special effects, very breathtaking. And there was this guy testing the chase, and he lost in the 4 first controls, and he stopped in the street. But because the game had no game over, the story didn't stop and he had to go back. The story continued. And then we asked him, okay, what did you think? How did you do in this scene? And he said, oh, I did great. So, but you didn't feel that you lost something, or that, no, I was supposed to follow the guy, but he was supposed to escape anyway, so I played well. And then we realized, wait a second, we spent so much time developing all this chase for a guy who would think that the game was just linear, when actually there were so many branches. And on Detroit, we thought exactly the same way. We remembered this story, and we thought, what will we do in order to make sure that people will know all the thing behind the curtains? And usually I'm the kind of guy who likes to hide what's behind the curtain. On Beyond, even the interface was invisible. The choices were invisible. Everything was organic. It was beautiful. But you know what? No one knew all the choices that were there. And then you think, maybe that was not the right decision. Maybe hiding everything from the player is not a good thing. And Detroit, to me, was a better compromise because it was about showing part of what you missed, so you understand it's there. And it played a major role in the success of the game, and we got incredible feedback from the community about this.
It stressed me out a little bit, because when I saw this, I'm like, oh, shit. Because I'm not the type that replay. I'm going to replay it now, because...
I went down the wrong road. And
yeah, I'm like,
this one
no,
is so
shit,
much
I missed
longer.
this. I'm like, oh, shit, I got stressed out. And like, because I have so many games. But I will replay it and see how different it is. But
It is different.
yeah, I can imagine. And also something that stresses me out, because I know, like, from being developed, I'm like, oh my God, so much content that people are not, there's so much. I mean, you told me yesterday, 4,000 pages. That's insane. Like this.
I was thinking the poor artists, like who did all the branches that nobody ever sees.
Yeah.
No, but this branch doesn't exist. We try to make sure that at least 30% of the people saw all the branches, and that's pretty much the statistics that we have. And there's not one artist working on all the branches that no one will see, because he would be pretty depressed. But no, everybody's working on everything, of course.
Yeah.
It's always his branches that nobody sees.
Did you have an answer on games that also inspired you for their storytelling as well? Other games? Or?
You know what? The older I get, the more I'm inspired by life and emotions and what I experience in real life, and I try to translate that into games. When you're a young writer, you tend to recreate what you liked, the games or the films, and I, like everyone else, this is what I did when I started. Fahrenheit was very inspired by many things, Heavy Rain also, and Beyond a little bit less, and hopefully Detroit a little bit less. So I guess that getting older and getting and trying to be better at what you're doing is trying to find your own voice, what you have to say that is you, and not borrowed to someone else.
So there is one worrisome direction that games are going, where with free-to-play and mobile games, where the whole point is really just to stretch everything out so that the player comes back every day and gets monetized more, right? If you have a game that's going to last 4 or 5 years, that's better than a game that you can finish after 100 hours of gameplay or whatever, right? So this is these kinds of games are generating so much revenue sometimes that the publishers are looking at that and going, that's what we need more of. Or we need to publish more of that. That seems like a bad thing. For
Something tells me that Josef's not going to like it.
I hate it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't hate it. It's just like, yeah. But I mean, hopefully, I do believe that we are enough gamers out there who love games, who will buy games, and who will make sure that the publishers understand that these type of games are needed. And I'm talking about games like Detroit, like God of War, like Red Dead, like Spider-Man, like Assassin's Creed, like all the indie titles. You know, like so I think that's a huge community. I mean, sure, there are some worrying stuff, but I do believe that the free-to-play market will drop soon. I mean, a good example is like the latest Apex. You know, you have something that's super well marketed, and then it drops down. It's hard to make a free-to-play. Everybody's fighting about people's playing time. I don't know. I just believe that a really great single-player experience, a really great game, will never disappear because there's enough gamers out there who love gaming. For me, like, I know that you said maybe when I get old I will stop playing. It's not possible. Like if I come to an apartment and I see there's no console or PC, I'm like, you don't have a, don't you have a toilet in here? It's like, it feels like something is missing. You know, I sometimes can look at historical movies. I'm like, how the fuck did they survive without video games? You know, it's like I have so much love to play, and I do hope and believe that will prevail. I mean, we will never be able to have not being able to play, for instance, Last of Us Part 2. I think we would always want that. So I think that will adjust itself. Maybe it will be, I mean, if you look at the mobile industry, it's super big, and you do a lot of money, blah, blah, but it still hasn't taken over the console, like the gaming markets. There's going to be two different branches, I would say.
Yeah, I'm happy with all games. I mean, what I love about games is their diversity, the fact that there are different styles of game for different people and different moments also in your day and your life. I play some free-to-play games and I really enjoy them. At the same time, when you look at the charts
Do you really?
yeah, I do.
What?
What's the point?
No, it's nothing wrong. I'm joking. I thought, do you play Candy Crush in that?
No, not Candy Crush.
Oh,
but
okay.
I play Hearthstone, for example.
Oh, yeah, I heard that's good. Yeah. I haven't played
great
myself.
game.
Yeah.
But there are
No, I was at a speech where this company called King, they were talking about creativity. I'm like, what? Are you serious? I mean, come on. I mean, look, I don't have anything. I don't have anything against being creative in a business mode. You have to be creative to make money, but don't
be like 30
don't come and
people in
yeah,
here
but don't
because
come
they
and
have
tell
a
me we're
studio.
creative. And this guy tried to sue some people who had their similar name. I'm like, come on, are you serious? All your games are similar to all other games. So, I mean, just be honest about it. We're here to make money. That's fine. I mean, that's no problem. But don't talk about being creative here. Sorry, man. It's like you want to be creative in the industry making money. That's fine, but not like creative. And also they compare themselves to Pixar. Like I'm like, oh yeah, sure. All right, I'm not gonna talk shit. I'm just gonna say.
too late, Joseph.
Yeah, too late. Whatever. Anyway, it's like